Hey there folks, Rel here. Welcome to the very first episode of the PlanetSide 2 Community Call, the show where you submit challenges, class loadouts, and questions that you'd like to have answered or see gameplay of. And in this episode we're going to be reviewing a Heavy Assault loadout sent in by Mogar1337, which he calls the Raider. The Raider is a TR specific loadout in that it uses the T16 Rhino with an advanced forward grip, infrared optics, high velocity ammo, and a suppressor. It's running a Commissioner secondary, and mine has an advanced laser sight, so we're going to run that. We are using the T7 Striker, which is the Empire-specific launcher for the Terran Republic. We have the basic nanomesh generator, Nanoweave armor, a concussion grenade, and he gives the option to go with either C4 or medical kits. This is kind of an important decision for this loadout because without C4, you basically have zero defenses against enemy max units, outside of your single concussion grenade. And I decided to go with medical kits since I have a couple unlocked, and I wanted to focus a bit more on survivability. If you'd like to make this loadout cross-faction, the most comparable options are the EM1 for the NC and the VX26 Polaris for the VS, as far as your primary. And to replace the Striker, you just pick up the Annihilator instead, which is your common pool lock-on launcher. Also, the loadout will be listed in the description below, so don't worry about pausing the video if you're interested. So to break this loadout down, it's basically an all-rounder. It's very versatile, but it's somewhat lacking in specific strengths like flat infantry or vehicle killing potential. This generally means that you'll find more success while fighting with groups of allies rather than fighting on your own. And you should see some footage from both sides of the fence in this video. The T16 is a very accurate weapon when you have an advanced forward grip attached, and it also has a relatively quick reload speed for its 100 round magazine. This makes it a great weapon at medium range, but it can be easily outplayed in close quarters. Unfortunately, the relatively low rate of fire coupled with an attached suppressor means that the killing potential of the weapon isn't very high, and by comparison it's going to take you significantly longer to drop your targets than it would with other weapons. The T16 fires at 652 rounds per minute, which is almost 100 rounds per minute less than the standard T9 Carve. It normally deals 143 damage up to 10 meters, dropping off to 125 at 65 meters, but since you are using a suppressor with high velocity ammo, your damage range is modified to look like the following. It's 143 damage up to only 5 meters and 125 damage at 50 meters. Because of that, you can pretty much count on your 7-shot kill range always being at least an 8-shot kill range or higher. It seems kind of bleak, but it's really not, because what you lose in damage you can actually make up for in accuracy as a player. What I mean by this is that you need to land headshots as often as possible, regardless of at which range you're fighting, and thanks to the weapon's very manageable recoil pattern with the pinpoint crosshairs of a night vision scope, it's pretty easy to do this. Even with high velocity ammo, the weapon is very easy to control, and headshots are the key factor to compensating for the lack of damage output caused by that relatively low rate of fire and the shortened damage range. The easiest way to stay on target with this weapon is to fire in quick bursts of around 6 shots or so, letting the gun rest for just a moment in between. And also you want to aim for the chest for the first shot so that the relatively high first shot recoil multiplier causes the subsequent shots to land in the head area. In addition to landing headshots, you also want to pace your encounters when possible, meaning fighting one enemy at a time with enough of a break in between that you can restore shields and reload if you have to. This doesn't just go for the T16, but basically any weapon with a subpar time to kill. Surprisingly enough, the suppressor makes this much easier to do because enemies won't immediately know where you are or whether or not you've already been killed. On the flip side of that, the night vision scope means that it's going to take you slightly longer to scope in on your targets, and this can be a death sentence in close quarters combat as it's a negative that stacks on top of the weapon's poor rate of fire and the mediocre hipfire capabilities. But this is kind of where your pistol comes in. The Commissioner is the hardest hitting sidearm in the game, and it can make short work of enemies in extremely close quarters. It takes 3 shots to kill an enemy with max Nanoweave armor, but a single shot and a knife swing can drop a non-Nanoweave enemy almost instantly. I would pull out your secondary when you're in very small buildings with lots of corners, as your commissioner and your knife is going to be able to acquire and kill enemies much more quickly than your primary will. Generally though, you want to fight from medium range or greater if you can help it, spotting your targets so that you can fire on the Doritos even when they're beyond the range of your night vision scope. Stay close to cover when possible and try to anticipate where your enemies are going to come from and be ready to get the jump on them. Pre-firing your weapon is also a very useful strategy due to the weapon's relatively large magazine size, and for those who don't know, pre-firing just means that you want to start firing at enemies before you actually see them. So if you know that an enemy is around the corner, you start firing and then you round the corner, and this helps compensate for latency issues and it gives you the upper hand. It can also work the other way around, so when you know that enemies are going to come at you from around a corner, just hold down the trigger so that they eat bullets as quickly as possible. Since we're running a standard nanite mesh generator, you want to save it for when you start taking fire, or just before the bullets start raining down. So this is the opposite of the mentality behind a resist shield, in which case you want to activate your resist shield before you even have a remote chance of taking damage. So instead, anticipate when the enemy is going to return fire, then you turn it on until the fight's over, then you turn it off when you're not using it. And this is an important equalizer in close quarters combat as well, where the damage comes about as quick as you can blink. In the case of vehicles, you want to activate it right before taking that big hit, and this is what the nanite mesh generator was made for, absorbing a large burst of damage and quickly giving you back your movement speed. Increasing the rank of the NMG will significantly increase its regeneration rate, and I do think that it's definitely worth investing in if you aren't keen on using the adrenaline shield. I've reviewed the heavy assault shields in the past if you're incredibly interested in hearing about the differences in each of them, and there's a link to that video in the description below. Normally I'd suggest a resist shield for a medium range support role, which is more what this build is geared toward, but I generally prefer the standard NMG or the adrenaline shield for situations where you're not constantly going to be receiving heals from friendly medics. And due to my solo aggressive playstyle, the NMG actually works very well for this build, as you can probably tell from the footage. So moving on to the tool slot, I don't think that people realize this yet, but the striker is actually a lot less powerful now than it used to be. It's still a very useful deterrent due to its lock-on capabilities, and it's great at dealing damage when enemies don't know that you are the one that's locking onto them, or when enemies can't do anything to escape, but you are required to aim down sights with this weapon for a very long time. This makes you a very vulnerable target when you're trying to dish out damage. If at any point you stop locking onto your target with the striker, the projectiles currently in flight are going to stop tracking their target and then they're going to fly straight up into the air. So not only do you have to sit there and follow your target while you're firing at them, but also you can't start reloading the next volley until your projectiles have landed. This equates to damage per second that's much lower than the stats of the weapon would lead you to believe. And I don't want to go off on the capabilities of the striker because it's actually worth reviewing now given the recent changes, but this isn't the right place to do that. That said though, it is important to realize that there is a time and place for this weapon, usually in open fields during battles like the one that you see here, but aside from that, it can cause a lot of problems in other situations. The biggest problem, of course, is not being able to deal with max units, and we talked briefly about this before, but since you don't have dumbfire capabilities, and in this case you're also lacking C4, you're going to have to let your teammates deal with the max units for the most part. If you're part of an organized group, this is completely viable, but if not, all you have available to you as a counter is your concussion grenade. For this loadout, the concussion grenade should be used tactically, instead of just throwing it to try to get a kill. It's almost more useful as an escape mechanism. Maybe not escape per se, but to give you a buffer to reposition yourself or compensate for your lack of overall damage output. In this short scene, I'm fighting an anti-vehicle Zoe Max, and a concussion grenade goes out, meaning that I can deal some damage, but if this were an anti-infantry Max, or even a better player, I'd be dead very quickly. All in all, this build is very good as an all-purpose loadout, and you can use it for support and in groups thanks to the capabilities of the striker, as well as the high capacity of your primary weapon. It's decent as a solo player thanks to the weapon's accuracy and the hard-hitting secondary, and you can pull off some pretty interesting engagements thanks to the medkits, the NMG, and your concussion grenade. If I were to swap anything out and keep with the theme of general versatility, it'd probably be the striker for the grounder. since the grounder has dumbfire functions and it also holds on to its anti-air lock-on capabilities. This gives you much more versatility when it comes to dealing with enemy max units as well as close-ranged vehicles, where locking on and firing off 5 rounds is plenty of time for that enemy tank to turn around and ruin your day. That said, I'm going to leave you with this final clip, one that I thought was hilarious as a last stand, and if you're paying close enough attention, you can pick up on a couple of very interesting techniques for dealing with situations like this, if you don't already know them, of course. If this video has been interesting, helpful, or entertaining, please feel free to like, subscribe, tell your friends about the channel, and like we said at the very start of this, this is the first episode of the PlanetSide 2 community call, and I would like to urge you all to submit loadouts that you'd like to see reviewed, questions that you'd like to hear answered, and even challenges that you'd like to see me complete. Just leave all of those thoughts in the comment section down below. Thanks very much, folks. We're all signing off.
Generator destroyed.
We're about to lose this facility. The enemy has the facility. A costly failure.